Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a really tough topic, sextortion.
It's definitely a difficult one, and important to clarify up front, it's not quite the same thing as, say, revenge porn.
Right, that's usually more about angry ex-partners sharing things. Sextortion, well, it's blackmail, isn't it?
Exactly. It's about someone getting hold of sexually explicit photos or videos and then using them to coerce the victim, force them into more sexual acts, or make other demands. It's fundamentally about control.
And often involves people they don't even know in real life or who are using fake identities.
Precisely. That manipulation is key. And unfortunately, it seems to be a growing problem globally, actually.
Yeah, you see authorities really starting to focus on it. The FBI in the States has campaigns specifically about the sextortion of kids.
And there was that big operation in the Philippines, Strike Back, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Resulted in dozens of arrests.
60 arrests, yeah. So it shows this isn't just some minor issue, it's widespread.
And the real-world impact. It can be utterly devastating.
It really can. We've seen such tragic stories. Like that poor teenager in California in Sunnyvale.
Oh, that was heartbreaking. Took his own life after a photo got shared.
Yeah. And while it's awful, it did lead to more anti-bullying programs, at least. And then there was Jessica Logan's story, too.
She spoke out about online harassment on TV, and then
took her own life. It just highlights the immense human cost involved.
Definitely. So for you listening, this deep dive is really about understanding this serious modern threat, how easily online stuff can spiral,
How everyday interactions can turn really harmful really fast.
Okay.
So let's get into the mechanics. The FBI talks about a 4-step process, right? How does that usually play out?
Yeah, they've mapped it out. It typically starts with what they call contact origination. Basically, the perpetrator makes contact and somehow gets the victim to send explicit material.
So like grooming them online, building trust.
Exactly. It often starts seemingly innocently, then escalates. They manipulate them into sharing that first picture or video.
Okay, so they have the material. What's step 2?
The demand. Once they have that leverage, they start asking for more. More photos, more videos, maybe live video chats, that kind of thing. Sometimes money, though our sources focus more on the sexual coercion aspect.
It's an escalation. And then comes the actual blackmail part.
Right. Step 3 is the threat. If the victim refuses the new demands, the perpetrator threatens to release the original material. Send it to friends, family, post it online. That fear of exposure is the weapon.
The core of the coercion. And the final step.
Is the exposure itself or just continued exploitation? If the victim still resists, they might actually share the images, or they just keep the cycle going, demanding more and more, holding that threat over them.
It's a really nasty cycle of control, and the ways they initiate this. The sources mentioned some pretty disturbing tactics.
Oh, yeah. There's that case of the guy, 31 years old, I think, using Facebook, video chats.
Creating loads of fake profiles.
Loads of them. Even pretending to be Justin Bieber, apparently, to lure people in. That anonymity online it's a massive advantage for them.
And the other method was even more sort of invasive.
Yeah, hacking. Actually breaking into someone's computer. If they do that, they can just steal images that are already there. Or install spyware.
Which gives them even more leverage. Access to contacts, personal info.
Exactly. It makes the threats even more potent, more terrifying. It's not random, it's targeted exploitation.
Which brings us to the psychological toll. There was that Walden University dissertation you mentioned. It tried to look into this, even with some limitations, sample size-wise.
Right. It acknowledged the statistical limits, but it aimed to explore the effects systematically. And drawing on earlier research, too, it highlighted something interesting. Even the act of sending the sext initially, before any blackmail, caused shame for some people.
So there was already an underlying discomfort or anxiety there for some.
Potentially, yeah. A vulnerability. And then when the sextortion starts, well, the research it cites talks about adolescents feeling just intense fear, humiliation, really deep distress.
And that initial shame or anxiety must just get magnified massively by the blackmail situation.
Oh, absolutely. The constant fear, the betrayal, feeling trapped, it can have really serious long-term psychological consequences, which is why, mental health support is so crucial for victims.
Makes total sense. And the dissertation also looked at why victims might hesitate to actually report it or get help.
Yes, that's a key piece. It compared emerging adults who'd experienced sextortion after sexting with those who'd only sexted, looking at their willingness to seek help using tools like the General Help-Seeking Questionnaire, again, acknowledging limitations, but it points towards known barriers.
And what are some of those main barriers? Why wouldn't someone report it?
A lot of it comes down to fear and shame. Fear of being judged, being seen as weak or stupid for sending the material in the first place.
Blaming themselves, maybe.
Very much so. Self-blame is huge. Plus, sometimes there's this hope that it'll just magically resolve itself if they ignore it, which it rarely does.
That sense of isolation must be overwhelming.
Totally. And research cited suggests young people especially might avoid professionals because of these fears. They're often more likely to turn to friends or family first, if anyone.
Right. The study apparently used other questionnaires too, like one about reasons for calling the police.
Yeah, to understand the specific barriers to involving authorities. And it also looked at self-stigma, that internal feeling of shame about needing help in the first place, using something called the self-stigma of seeking help scale. All these factors create this wall around the victim.
Now, that Walden study focused specifically on emerging adults. That's what, 18 to 25-year-olds? Why is that age group particularly relevant here?
Well, emerging adulthood is this really distinct phase. You've got this push for independence, figuring out who you are, self-expression. But your brain is actually still developing, particularly the parts involved in judgment and impulse control.
So it's a time of big changes and maybe vulnerabilities.
Kind of a mix. They're gaining maturity, but might still be susceptible. Research shows it's often a period of increased risk-taking, generally, physically, legally, psychologically. Peer pressure can still be a factor, too.
And aren't mental health challenges also quite prevalent in that age group?
Sadly, yes. Figures suggest a pretty high percentage, maybe 40–50%, meet criteria for at least one mental health disorder each year. So there can be existing vulnerabilities.
So how does all that connect to online risks like sextortion?
Well, you combine that potential impulsivity, the natural curiosity of that age, maybe not fully developed judgment yet, with basically constant access to smartphones and the internet.
Creates a risky environment.
It can, yeah. Some research suggests they might see sexting itself as just flirting or a bit of fun without maybe fully clocking the potential downsides, the risk of exploitation, or the harm it could do down the line.
Right, not fully grasping how permanent things can be online or how easily trust can be abused.
Yeah.
Okay, now, we did get a specific question from a listener.
Okay.
It was about trying to understand the motivation behind someone doing this. They specifically mentioned a TV weatherman, Josh Fitzpatrick, and asked, did someone hurt him emotionally? And he lashed out at them, trying to find a why.
And it's a really natural question, isn't it? You want to understand what drives someone to cause that kind of harm. But we have to be really clear here.
Okay.
The sources we've been discussing today, the general info on sextortion mechanics, the Walden study, they contain absolutely zero information about anyone named Josh Fitzpatrick, nothing at all.
So no specifics on him in our material?
None. And they also don't give detailed psychological profiles of perpetrators in general beyond outlining their tactics, the luring, the blackmail, the fake identities.
So talking about his specific emotional state or reasons.
That would be pure guesswork. It's just not in the data we have for this deep dive. We can only stick to what the sources tell us about the methods used, the fake profiles, the hacking, the way trust is built and then broken.
Got it. So our focus, based on the evidence we do have, stays on understanding the crime itself, the impact on victims, and those vulnerabilities, especially for young adults.
Exactly. The mechanics, the consequences, the risk factors, that's what our sources allow us to explore.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive on sextortion.
Yeah.
What are the main things you think people should take away?
Well, first, just recognizing sextortion as a serious, damaging crime. It's not trivial. And realizing that emerging adults can be particularly targeted, caught in that phase between adolescence and full adulthood.
And remembering that distinct pattern. Getting the material, demanding more, threatening exposure.
Yes. And crucially, understanding the deep psychological impact, the shame, the fear, the isolation, and why victims often feel unable to reach out for help. That silence is part of the problem.
Definitely. Knowing about these dynamics feels really vital today with so much of our lives online. It's about awareness and safety.
It is. Which maybe leads to a final thought, something for you to chew on after this. What societal factors might be playing into all this? both the initial sharing of images and the exploitation.
Like, what role does online anonymity play? Or our need for connection online?
Exactly. How do those things intersect with these risks? And maybe also take a moment to think about what resources actually exist, in your community or online to help someone if they do experience this kind of online exploitation. Where would they even turn?